Matt here. Yesterday I uploaded a couple of videos which were doctored. That means the contents of them were adjusted to change the meaning that I was trying to convey. And those videos were describing the American military-industrial complex and how the military-industrial complex is a very big problem which keeps getting us involved in wars that we have no part in and keeps Australians dead, and if is not addressed is going to have us killed in the future. What I said is that we need to kick the Americans out of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing organization. We need to do that because most of warfare and the wars which are planned and how those things develop happens in the intelligence war. It happens, outcomes are decided and things are put in motion long before boots are put on the ground. And there was a particular snippet of my second video which I'm almost certain was doctored, and what the video has me saying, which is not what I said, was that the military-industrial complex is a small problem, and geopolitics is primarily what shapes NATO defense policy. And that's not entirely true. I'm sure geopolitics plays a major role, a massive role. But the reason why we need to kick the Americans out of Five Eyes is because of their constitution and their electoral system. Because this creates vulnerabilities for bad actors, not bad actors, just politicians to get us involved in shit that we really don't need to be involved in, due to the necessity to have a humongous amount of money in their campaign chests during elections. So in the United States, they do not have the first past the post system that we have in Australia. This allows us to give preferences to different parties. So if our favoured candidate comes in, a candidate which we prefer over the worst possible option gets to take our vote. So we end up effectively having 5 votes instead of just 1. And it creates a much more representative democracy of our people and the interests of our people. Voting is also compulsory in Australia, which means that our parliament is more representative of the people and not just the people who are just super uber passionate about politics. And you might think, okay, well, surely the people who are more passionate about it are the ones who know the most. Well, no, they're the ones that you've been able to activate to vote. Remember all that stuff that we were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan about hearts and minds, and all the money which went into the public relations and these things, these school building projects and those kinds of things to try and get them to like us? Well, your political parties do the same thing. And what they've done is that they've operationalized 2 polar ends of the population, and they've tried to make their values as different as possible. Now, in reality, the policies they say are quite mild, but the ideological fervor which American politics is conducted in is very different to countries such as Australia or the Commonwealth countries. We're a lot more mild. We have a lot more commonalities that we're able to discuss, and we have very significant differences which are conveyed in our more far left and far right parties, which we actually have. Right? So there's a more diverse political representation in countries like Australia because the wills of the people are expressed in our political system. In the United States, because voting is not compulsory, the only people who show up are the ones that the party has been able to mobilize. And to mobilize them, you need a lot of money. You need to spend billions of dollars in advertising. Our elections are so much cheaper. And to get political influence over the population in the United States, well, there is a playbook. There's a well-developed playbook, and one of those things that you can do is that you can declare a war. because that makes you look presidential. It makes you look like an authority figure. It makes you look like someone who can really command the respect of their executive arm. And the American people, their culture has this fervor for the military, and if I'm honest, a bit of a fervor for war. Right, the Star Spangled Banner is a war song. Our national anthem is a song about how it's, about the land. It's really, if I'm honest, our national anthem is really boring. I much prefer Waltzing Matilda, which was going to be our national anthem, and that's a song about a guy who steals a lamb and then gets murdered by a police officer. I much prefer that one. It describes the spirit of our people far better. So what happens in the United States is that you need to have a war to look presidential, and you also need to have a shit ton of money. Now, after you declare a war, you're going to have a massive defense budget. And the party who is most likely to take money from defense contractors, such as Lockheed Martin, are going to be the people who are more likely to keep that war going. And also, when you have a war, you have a much larger defense budget. When you have a large defense budget, a lot of the stuff in the way money works in the American government is that money isn't even necessarily allocated to a resource. It's put into sort of like a slush fund in a supply bill. That's how you guys fund your government, because if I'm honest, I could get into details of it, but you have a very old constitution, and a lot has changed. The same way that we didn't really have telephones back when you guys wrote your constitutions, we now have iPhones, and we can make an iPhone of a constitution, but you haven't. So we end up in this situation where there's these incentives at play to be at war. There's these incentives at play for politicians to keep America at war or find a new war, because that allows them to keep the money flowing to their senators for re-election. And it's across both parties. And it's terrible. And we can't keep you guys in charge of this. We can't let the Americans decide on Australia's and the Commonwealth countries' foreign policy, and particularly our military policy. Because we've had 3 wars now. We had Afghanistan, which was a false flag operation. Iraq, which was a false flag operation, where we went along with American intelligence, and we ended up with this terrible war. And it's time for you guys to go.